When we sit there and we start to think about the 2024-2025 Duke basketball season, two guys in particular I think are flying under the radar. Why aren't we talking about them enough?
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us on Tuesday, August 20th, 2024. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop for everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. We hope that you're doing well here today. Hope you got a chance to listen or watch our Mailbag Monday episode yesterday. Make sure that you go check that out. Once again, Locked On Blue Devils, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's show, we're calling it a Hype Up Tuesday. We got to hype up a couple of Blue Devils who I believe we're not talking about enough ahead of this new season. I'll bury the lead. It's Isaiah Evans and Maliq Brown. And I've got Kevin Connelly back with us for the second straight day to talk about all of that here throughout today's show. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Really appreciate your support in that regard here on Locked On Blue Devils. Watch our show daily on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like this video. Share it with your friends. Your support just means so much to us here at Locked On Blue Devils. Really proud of what we're able to do. Follow us on X at @LO_Blue Devils, and I'm there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. And so without further ado, as I said, the second straight day, he is Kevin Connelly, the site expert for Ball Durham, and he joins us once again. You ready to rock and roll again today, Kevin?
Let's roll with it, JJ.
Awesome. Let's get to it. I want to talk about a couple of players in particular who I believe have just not been getting the recognition or the praise, the talk, the hype, as we call this kind of a Hype Up Tuesday, as others, and that being Isaiah Evans and Maliq Brown. So I want to start with Isaiah Evans here in this first segment today, Kevin. And I find it quite strange because we've been talking a whole lot about Cooper Flagg, and deservedly so. When you look at this freshman class coming in, he's going to be the number one overall pick. He's going to be or played with Team USA's select team prior to the Olympics. Talking a lot about Maliq, who competed in the Olympics for his country in South Sudan there in Paris. We've been talking a whole lot about Connelly as of late, considering the social media clips that Duke's been putting out there in the Brotherhood podcast. Players on the team are talking about Con being one of the biggest surprises so far and a guy that's expected to pop off. And so I get all of that. However, when we look at the freshman class and when we remind ourselves of who we were hyping up going into the new season, Isaiah Evans was one of those biggest names, Kevin. And as of late, to me, it feels like we haven't been talking about him. Do you agree with the sentiment?
I do agree, and I know you went a little deeper into this Duke recruiting class. I think Isaiah Evans is probably hurt the most by having Cooper Flagg, not just on this team, but in this recruiting class, to the extent of he gets all the headlines. He's what everyone wants to listen and read and talk about. But in reality, if you take Cooper Flagg off this team and out of this recruiting class, which, don't get me wrong, that would be a major loss for the potential success of this Blue Devil team next season, Isaiah Evans is probably that guy that everybody's talking about, that everybody's looking at. Now, obviously, Isaiah Evans doesn't go and compete in the USA select team basketball camp or is projected to be the number one overall pick. But he is still projected to be a first-round pick in next year's NBA draft, along with the three other guys you mentioned in Cooper Flagg, Maliq, and Connelly. So I do agree with you. And you look what Isaiah Evans did, being a local kid, going to North Mecklenburg. He was the top player in the state of North Carolina. He was a McDonald's All-American. And it feels like he did everything for his team, especially this past season, being the Gatorade North Carolina Player of the Year. And I think he averaged just under 30 points. And he did it at all three levels. And I think maybe the one knock is that the level he played at in North Carolina isn't obviously the national schedule that Cooper Flagg played at Montverde Academy. So the level of competition he played during his high school years might not be as great as Cooper Flagg, but I mean, he was still putting up some of these type numbers in AAU ball. He played on the Nike Hoop Summit team. So I still think there is a lot of potential in Isaiah Evans. Obviously, the upside of his game is offense. And then the questions you have is, can he physically compete with college level players in terms of his body type and his weight and his strength? But yeah, I definitely would agree with your assessment that Isaiah Evans is flying under the radar.
He's buying into kind of the persona out there regarding his physical makeup, right? On Instagram, his handle is Showtime Slim. Slim is something he's embodying. People talk a lot about Brandon Ingram and his frame coming into Duke. But again, to your point, what he was able to accomplish in high school should certainly be celebrated, regardless of competition. North Carolina is a hoop state, after all, a 5-star with every recruiting service out there, out of North Mecklenburg High School in Charlotte, ranked the #1 player in North Carolina, North Carolina's Mr. Basketball. His number 0 jersey was retired by North Mech. They won the state title over New Hanover and finished the season with a 30-3 record on the year. Isaiah Evans averaged 27.5 points in North Carolina competition. Again, the Gatorade North Carolina Player of the Year. Unbelievable. And throughout the course of the playoffs, he averaged nearly 32 points per game. So he extended his scoring average at the 4A level, the highest classification of basketball in North Carolina. And the dude's averaging 32 points per game in those state playoffs to go and win a state title for his high school.
Yeah, he's accomplished it all. And like I said, he is big time. And I think a lot of people coming into this summer were thinking he was going to be the starting small forward for this Duke team. And not to say that he didn't have a good summer and a good offseason and good introduction to Duke basketball, but I think what a lot of people heard from some of the others that were in camp, like a Sion James, it feels like his type, who doesn't really command the basketball in order to be effective, could be effective with those first 5. And as we talked about in other shows, even on yesterday's show, of Tyrese Proctor, Caleb Foster, Cooper Flagg, and Common Malawak, we think those are 4 cemented starters for this Duke basketball team this upcoming season, with the small forward spot still being up for grabs. So yeah, I think Isaiah Evans is flying under the radar, and I think now is when you're going to start to see him get in the weight room a lot as the team comes back for the start of the fall semester, and you hope he can kind of take off from here. And I think another good thing is he's not getting maybe that much hype around local media or social media, I guess I should say, because of Cooper Flagg. I think that can also be a good thing for him because it takes all the pressure off him. He's not the one that's being tasked with having to go out there and score anywhere from 15 to 19 points per game, like that the pressure that's going to be placed on the shoulders of Cooper Flagg to do that for this Duke team to be successful.
We're going to let the rest of the world sleep on Isaiah Evans and what he's able to do as a basketball player. You and I know very well how much he's going to be able to accomplish for the Duke basketball team ahead of the new season. Another guy that's not being talked about enough right now is Duke's transfer from Syracuse, Maliq Brown. Maliq Brown, a big-time addition for the Blue Devils. We tell you more about him after this break. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends at Ibata. Ibata is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies and even toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibata user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner that you've been craving. You could save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Best Buy, and so much more. Right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 for just trying Ibata and using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. So go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's Ibata, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. Ibata is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, let's keep rolling. Kevin Connelly's here. He's the site expert for Ball Durham. Tell us about Ball Durham, Kev.
Well, Ball Durham, we got everything you could possibly want on Duke basketball and Duke football. You could read us every single day over at balldurham.com. And then obviously at the bottom of your screen there, follow us on social media at ball_Durham. We got a lot of content coming up. We talked about Duke football yesterday. We're talking about Duke basketball today. We're all over it over at the website. So come give us a read.
All right, so we just talked about Isaiah Evans. I'm throwing Malik Brown in this conversation as well as someone that we're not talking about enough. When we look at the roster, we threw out all the freshmen that are getting a lot of praise right now prior to this upcoming season. We've talked a whole lot about Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster as the two guys coming back from last year's squad for Duke. We mentioned Sion James and his makeup and what he's going to bring on the defensive end of the floor. Like Mason Gillis, defense, I think, is where you start with Malik Brown and what he's going to do for this Duke basketball team. But am I right, Kevin? Do you feel as though there's a little bit of a lack of talk right now about Malik Brown and that the sizable role that we might think he could have this season?
Yeah, 100%, because I think he's proven it in the ACC already, right? I mean, when's the last time you heard of a guy who really, he's undersized for a center at 6'9", but played a lot of the 4 and the 5 primarily at Syracuse. And I mean, he led the ACC in steals with 71 last season. I mean, that's almost unheard of. And he was a guy who was top 15 in both rebounding and block shots as well. He's someone who can do a little bit of everything. Now, the one thing he really can't do is shoot the ball from 3-point range, but he's so effective shooting from 2-point range. I mean, this is a guy who almost makes about 70% of his 2-point field goals. I think he's going to be, just for those stats alone and doing it in the ACC, it's not like he was doing it in a mid-major conference somewhere else around the country. He was doing it in the same league against the same teams he's going to be playing on with this Duke team next season. I think he's absolutely being undersold right now. And I think you also look, and Duke fans will remember it, I mean, the game that he had in Cameron, 26 points, I believe it was a career high for him. I mean, he was awesome in that game for Syracuse. And I know that does get talked about among Duke circles, but I would agree, Malik Brown, it feels like he has just about everything that he can bring to the table to help this Blue Devil squad.
The 26-point performance against Duke, and then also on February 7th of this year, another game a lot of people keep talking about, Kevin, versus Louisville. Malik Brown amassed 11 points on 4 of 4 shooting from the field, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 6 blocks, and 5 steals to achieve the first 5-by-5 performance while shooting 100% by any player on the NCAA D1 level, men's or women's, and then NBA or WNBA in the last 25 years. Holy cow, a 5 for 5 while going, or 5-by-5, I should say, while shooting 100% from the floor. He does everything.
That's a lot. That's a lot of games. That's a lot of basketball. Everything you just laid out there. D1 men's and women's basketball, plus the NBA, plus the WNBA, all over the last 25 years. I mean, that's just impressive in itself. And that's a lot of games and a lot of players that have played in a lot of games. And he's the only one that's done it in the past 25 years. So, like I said, I think both players, when they originally committed to Duke, did have glowing reviews. A lot of people were excited about them. But I think just other additions around the roster maybe have darkened the shade on them a little bit and brightened it on other people like a Cooper Flagg and a Common Malawak. But yeah, these two players certainly feel like they are going to have big roles for the Blue Devils next season.
Talking about Malik Brown specifically, 6'9", his makeup and what he will be able to bring on the interior. How big is that?
Yeah, and I mean, again, he's done it at the ACC level. I think in theory, you would like him to be a little bit taller than 6'9", but if you watch the tape, he plays a lot bigger than what his size indicates. He's still 222 pounds is what Duke lists him on their official roster. And when you see clips and when you hear players talk in these social media videos, a lot of them say Maliq Brown was one of the best defenders on the floor in these scrimmages and in these workouts. So the only thing you have to hope is that translates over to game action, and he's able to carry that forward wearing a different jersey in the ACC.
Maliq Brown, a 4-time state champion back in high school, a really decorated career, and now he's getting the opportunity to play for Duke ahead of this upcoming season. Two guys that we believe not getting a whole lot of talk. That's why we got to hype them up today, a Hype Up Tuesday. Again, Kevin, we got to make sure people remember the role that both Isaiah Evans and Maliq Brown will play for Duke this season.
Absolutely. And again, you go into the rotations, and could both players potentially work in a starting five situation? Yes, I think there's no doubt about that. But you look at different units and different rotations, and a second unit that this Duke team is going to be very deep that John Shire could put on the floor. And I think both these players complement each other well. Isaiah Evans, at least what he's shown at the high school level, is a ball-dominant player, really needs the ball in his hands to be successful. And Maliq Brown feels like he's just the opposite. He capitalizes on the few opportunities he gets per game. So I feel like these two players, yes, we're talking about them individually, but I also feel like they would complement each other very well on the floor.
Can't wait to see it unfold. Can't wait to see those two guys playing together on this basketball team. All right, we're talking about guys who didn't get enough recognition and praise. What if we look back to just this past year's squad, give you an idea kind of what we're talking about here on a Hype Up Tuesday, and we'll do that after we take one more time out here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We've got something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. I love NFL Sunday Ticket, and I know that you will too. You get to watch all of them. And when you get a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All that you need to do this is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just go ahead and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sports book. Once again, FanDuel is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Final segment here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. I'm JJ Jackson, joined today by Kevin Connelly, the site expert for Ball Durham. Kevin, we've been talking about two players today who we believe are not getting enough praise and recognition, hype, and talk going into the new season. Let's take a trip back, though. Let's go back down memory lane to the season that just expired for this Duke basketball team. When you think about a team that makes it all the way to the Elite Eight, that goes on that awesome run, many wins, 27 total on the year, who's one of those guys that you think back and you're like, you know what? I hope 5 years from now, 10 years from now, however long it is, we think back and are still giving them enough praise for what they were able to do.
Well, you know, I think that's a really good question because you look at last year's team and trying to put myself in this scenario that we had 365 days ago. I know Jared McCain was talked about. He was hyped. But I think the players we were talking the most about last season were Kyle Filipowski, Mark Mitchell, Jeremy Roach, Tyrese Proctor, right? The big conversation last year was about the returners. It wasn't necessarily about the newcomers. So I look at a player like Jared McCain, and I don't think a lot of people expected that he was probably going to be the second best player on Duke's team, maybe the best player when it came to the biggest games of the season. So he's a player I really look at this time last year that might not have been gathering that much hype because we were talking about the returners and not really the newcomers. I feel like this year it's different. We're talking a lot about the newcomers. Obviously, the hype around Cooper Flagg. Yes, we are bringing Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster into the discussion to an extent, but it's more about the freshmen and the transfers compared to just those only two guys returning.
Yeah, a little bit of a different makeup with how the roster looks like going into this season as to last. When I think back on last year's squad, I think we are going to remember what Jared McCain was able to do, emerging as a freshman, working his way into being a first-round pick. Kyle Filipowski, one of the top players in all of the ACC. I felt like there was plenty of chatter about what he was able to accomplish this past season. I think we even talked a good bit about someone like Mark Mitchell, right? Because we continuously threw out, the numbers that Duke had when he was scoring in double figures versus when he wasn't, how important he was as a defender, going back to his freshman year, and the one game he misses is that loss against Tennessee. So I think maybe you take Mark Mitchell out of that conversation even. I think maybe it's someone like Jeremy Roach, Kevin, as strange as that sounds, like what he was able to do, how good he was in his senior season, playing and finishing off a 4-year career for the Blue Devils. Like, absolutely, there's plenty of reason why we need to hype up Jeremy Roach on this Tuesday for what he was able to do.
No, absolutely. I mean, 4-year player, been through it all, was through the absolute highs and the absolute lows of this program, and moves on to go to finish his final college year at another place that has high expectations for this season. But I think certainly he'll be welcomed back with open arms and thought about fondly by Duke fans.
Big things coming for the Duke basketball team this season. And again, an awesome year that we were able to celebrate on the way to the Final Four. Still stings. We couldn't get over that NC State hurdle a couple of different times throughout the course of the season, Kevin. And I talked last week a little bit with Brendan Marks of The Athletic about league play coming up this season. A lot of talk about UNC, a lot of talk about Louisville and their roster turnover going into the year as some teams at the very top of the league. And we find ourselves not really talking about NC State once again, and they just went to the Final Four this past season.
Yeah, it feels like they always fly underneath the radar. ACC basketball obviously is always very strong. I feel like at least in the regular season, it's going to appear a lot stronger on paper this year. I mean, once these teams get into the NCAA tournament, it always seems like they do perform, even if you go back a couple of years. Syracuse teams that people didn't think were very strong in the regular season found their way into the tournament, and then you saw them always in a Sweet 16 and Elite 8. You look at NC State from this past year, obviously you have the two heavy hitters with Duke and North Carolina, Virginia, a national champion from a couple of years ago. So it feels like the ACC on paper has been down these past couple of years. I think they're going to come back. I think Notre Dame's going to be a lot better. You mentioned Louisville. They can't be worse if we put it bluntly. But I do think they're going to take a major step forward with a new head coach and Pat Kelsey and the excitement he's going to bring around that program. So I do think it's going to be a fun year of basketball in the ACC.
Cooper Flagg recaps his Team USA experience, projecting the 2028 Olympic roster and the number of different Blue Devils that could be there. Kyle Filipowski signs an incredibly large contract for a second-round draft pick. These are all stories that have been posted recently at balldurham.com, Kevin. How can people best support you?
You can support us by just giving us your views and your reads every single day over at balldurham.com. Like I said, we have content daily, sometimes multiple times per day we're posting. And even if you just every morning you log on to Ball Durham and see what we posted throughout the day, that is very much appreciated.
Thank you for the time today, Kevin. Joining us a couple of times this week. We'll do it again soon, okay?
Thanks, JJ.
All right, that's Kevin Connelly joining us on the program today. Check him out on X at KevinConnelly24 and also at @ball_Durham. That's going to do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.